What if everything you've heard about Mary Magdalene is incomplete, or worse, wrong? She stood at the foot of the cross, was the first to witness Jesus' resurrection, and yet, after this decisive moment, she disappears from Scripture. No account of her death, no record of what happened to her. Only silence. But does this silence truly signify absence? Or is it a hint of something that was purposefully hidden? Why do biblical texts abruptly end their journey, while Christian tradition continues to repeat the same reduced and fragmented narrative? Today, we will explore what lies behind this absence. Ancient legends, rejected manuscripts, and traditions that point to a truth buried by time and institutional power. And perhaps, at the end of this journey, the true death of Mary Magdalene will reveal itself as something much deeper than the physical, simple death of a body. Are you ready to face the silence and seek the answers it hides? Prepare for a discovery that could transform everything you thought you knew about Mary Magdalene. What you'll see in this video isn't found in conventional sermons or official manuals on the history of faith. We'll reveal documents ignored for centuries, passages rejected by councils, traditions preserved far from the cathedrals of Rome. And in doing so, a new image of Mary Magdalene begins to emerge, stronger, more active, and far more relevant than what mainstream history has led us to believe. There's another side to this story. A side in which Mary doesn't disappear after the resurrection. A side in which she lives on, walking among unknown peoples, carrying with her a message that many have tried to bury. Throughout this video, you'll be guided by biblical evidence, ancient testimonies, and persistent legends that challenge the official versions. Mary Magdalene's fate may not have ended in Jerusalem, and what this reveals about her importance in Christianity could shake the oldest foundations of religious tradition. This isn't just a video. It's an invitation to investigate, reflect, and perhaps see Mary Magdalene as you've never seen her before. Who was Mary Magdalene? Between sin, the cross, and oblivion, for centuries, the name Mary Magdalene was associated with the image of a repentant woman, a former prostitute who supposedly found redemption at the feet of Jesus. This version was reinforced by sermons, paintings, and popular traditions. But curiously, this identity is never affirmed in the Gospels. In fact, the biblical texts present us with a very different woman. Mary, called Magdalene, is mentioned prominently in all four Gospels. She is described as someone from whom Jesus cast out 7 demons. This expression, often misunderstood, may have more of a spiritual than a moral meaning, pointing to a profound and transformative liberation. From this encounter onward, Mary became one of Christ's most faithful followers. She appeared at his side at crucial moments, not only during his miracles and teachings, but especially when almost everyone abandoned him. She was there, at the foot of the cross, when the disciples fled. She observed the burial. And she was the first to arrive at the tomb on Sunday morning, receiving the message of the resurrection directly from an angel, and later, from Jesus himself. This role as a witness to the resurrection is unique. No other follower receives such an honor. Yet, after this decisive moment, Mary Magdalene disappears from the official narratives. There's no mention of her later life, her ministry, her death, or her legacy. Why is this woman, who witnessed the central event of the Christian faith, left out? Was it an accidental omission? Or a silence constructed over time to redefine her image and erase her influence? If we want to understand the true death of Mary Magdalene, perhaps the first step is to recognize that her story has been, from the beginning, retold, modified, and in some ways, silenced. And that behind the name Magdalene lies much more than a label of a repentant sinner. There's a strong, courageous, and above all, active presence. A presence that perhaps disturbed more than inspired. And now, I want to hear from you. If you feel there's something hidden in this story, something that's never been fully revealed, leave a symbol in the comments. Write a magnifying glass. If you're searching for the truth behind the silence, or simply say, I want to know what they didn't tell you about Mary Magdalene, share this video with someone who has also questioned the official versions. Like it if you believe there's more to the story than we've been told. And subscribe, because we'll continue exploring the forgotten voices, the hidden chapters, and the mysteries of faith. Your participation is essential, not only for the growth of this channel, but for this journey of discovery to continue together. The silence after the resurrection. Imagine the moment. The tomb is empty. Fear hangs in the air. The soldiers have disappeared. The disciples are hidden, and there she is, Mary Magdalene, alone, confused, until she hears a voice. A familiar voice. A word that echoes in her soul. Mary. It is Jesus, resurrected. And it is to her, not Peter, not John, not any other disciple, that he chooses to reveal this miracle. The first witness to the resurrection. The messenger of the most powerful news in Christian history. And yet, after that, silence. Mary disappears from the official records. No letter, no apostolic account. No end to her story. The tradition's history tried to forget. But did she really disappear? Or was her story removed from the official pages? There is evidence that Mary Magdalene continued her mission. According to oral traditions preserved in southern France, she fled Jerusalem after the persecution that followed Jesus' death. She set sail with other followers, including Mary, Jesus' mother, and Lazarus, and landed on the coast of Gaul, present-day France. There, she lived for many years, preaching and leading people to faith. Tradition holds that she spent her last days in a cave called Saint Baume, in seclusion and contemplation. And upon her death, she was buried there, on European soil. In the town of Saint Maximin la Saint Baume, a basilica still stands today that claims to house her relics. The silenced voice in the lost scriptures. Other ancient texts also offer clues. The Gospel of Mary, discovered in the 19th century in Gnostic manuscripts, presents a learned, wise woman in full dialogue with Jesus' disciples. There, Mary Magdalene is no ordinary follower. She understands the Master's profound teachings, interprets visions, and is recognized as a spiritual leader. Peter and other disciples, however, question her. Some reject her. She responds firmly. She does not remain silent. This gospel, like so many other Gnostic texts, was banned from the official canons, but it reveals a figure of authority, of vision, of faith, very different from the limited image of the forgiven sinner that mainstream history has handed down to us. The possibility of a lost legacy. If these sources are considered local traditions, apocryphal gospels, medieval inscriptions, one question arises more forcefully. Why was Mary Magdalene silenced? Did her closeness to Jesus, her spiritual leadership, and her unique vision threaten the power structures that formed in the following centuries? Was the mere fact that she was a woman enough to justify her exclusion? And furthermore, if she truly lived and died elsewhere, if there are traces of her presence in Europe, what does this say about the hidden paths of early Christianity? How many stories were buried with her? Final reflection of this block, perhaps. The true death of Mary Magdalene was not recorded because it was not merely a physical death. It was the erasure of her voice, the denial of her authority, the deliberate end of a story that, had it been preserved, could have profoundly transformed the role of women within the Christian faith. But today, these questions are being raised again. And each discovery, each rediscovered fragment, each retold legend, brings us closer to something that seems increasingly clear. Mary Magdalene was not just a follower. She was a central figure, a leader, perhaps one of the most important in Christian history. And perhaps her true death is not yet over. She continues to die. Each time her story is ignored. And she is reborn. Each time someone, like you, decides to listen to her again. Mary Magdalene in France. Flight, mystery, and medieval cult. The oldest tradition outside the Bible about the fate of Mary Magdalene arises in the Provence region of southern France. There, since at least the 9th century, accounts have circulated that, after the resurrection and the persecution of Christians in Jerusalem, Mary embarked with other disciples in a boat without sails or oars, trusting solely to divine providence. This boat is said to have reached the shores of the region known today as Saint-la-mer. Texts claim that she continued onto a mountainous and isolated region called Saint-Bone, where she lived the last 30 years of her life in spiritual retreat, in deep meditation and penance. To this day, the Saint-Baume Grotto is a site of Christian pilgrimage. In the town of Saint-Maximin-la-Saint-Baume, there is a basilica that claims to house the relics of Mary Magdalene, discovered by monks in the 13th century. These remains were sealed in a crystal reliquary and displayed for centuries for public veneration. Truth or devotion, fact or mythical construction? The debate remains open. The Grail, the Cathars, and the royal blood. More daring theories during the Middle Ages, especially between the 12th and 14th centuries. Even bolder associations emerged. Some Gnostic Cathar and even Templar traditions suggested that Mary Magdalene was not just a disciple, but a spiritual or even conjugal partner of Jesus. This view, while not canonical, spread to regions of Europe where Christianity took on more mystical and symbolic forms. According to these theories, Mary carried something far more valuable than simple teachings. She carried with her the sacred lineage. These ideas have been revived in modern literature, such as Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, which popularized the notion of Mary Magdalene as the bearer of the royal blood, the Sangreal, which some interpret not as a physical chalice, but as the womb that would have produced Jesus' offspring. Although there is no direct historical evidence to support this theory, it continues to fuel debate and research, precisely because it touches on an essential question. What was Mary Magdalene's true role in the life and mission of Jesus? Mary Magdalene as a spiritual archetype beyond facts and traditions. There's also the symbol. Mary Magdalene represents, for many theologians and mystics, the soul that seeks, that loves, that falls and rises again. Her figure spans the centuries. As a powerful archetype of transformation, faith, and revelation, she is not just a historical figure. She is a spiritual presence that continues to defy silence. Eastern iconography depicts her holding a red egg, a symbol of resurrection and hidden life. In Western art, she often appears with an alabaster jar, perhaps the same one with which she anointed Jesus' feet, as a sign of total surrender and adoration. A mystery that persists. There is still much to be said, and even more to be discovered, whether in rejected texts, local traditions, clues buried for centuries, or reflections that intersect faith and mystery. Mary Magdalene remains a living, disturbing, and essential figure, not because of what they said she was, but because of what we still try to understand. Mary Magdalene was the first to see the risen one, the first to carry the most important news in history, but she was also the first to be forgotten, the first to be silenced. Tradition called her a prostitute. History reduced her to a penitent. And for centuries, this image was accepted as truth. But what if Mary Magdalene's true death wasn't physical? What if she died when her memory was manipulated? When her leadership was erased? When her voice, full of faith, wisdom, and courage, was muffled by a structure that didn't know how or didn't want to recognize her? What would have happened if Mary had been remembered as the first apostle and not as the repentant sinner? What would Christian faith, the role of women in the church, the very idea of discipleship look like today? These are questions that remain open, and perhaps there is no definitive answer, but there is a call to listen, a call to inquiry, and above all, a call to reverence for a story that has survived time, silence, and omission. Mary Magdalene. may not have left a clearly marked tomb, but she left traces, and those who dare follow these traces find more than a forgotten woman. Find a mirror of faith in its purest form. Courageous, loyal, uncomfortable, true.